Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a purely data-driven, objective look at one of the world's most polarizing figures. Whether you see him as a visionary genius or a controversial workaholic, there's an undeniably massive trail of data, historical milestones, and medical literature trailing right behind him. We're setting aside all the noise today to look strictly at the facts. So what actually drives the world's most ambitious, and let's face it, controversial innovator? That's the overarching question we're going to keep in the back of our minds today. And to find the answer, we aren't going to rely on idolization or criticism. We're going straight to the sources, from early family claims in aerospace history to medical journal abstracts, to piece together exactly how this all works. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap. Number 1, origins and the Emerald Myth. 2, the relentless rise of SpaceX. 3, the price of extreme ambition. And 4, Neuralink and our ethical future.
Starting off with Section 1, Origins and the Emerald Myth, where we're separating fact from fiction.
You know, modern startup culture absolutely loves a good self-made origin story. And because of that, where the seed money comes from is always hotly debated. Elon Musk is definitely no exception here. If you've been on the internet at all, you've probably heard this massive, persistent rumor that a Zambian emerald mine funded his whole early life and career. It's a story that totally flips that self-made narrative on its head. But where did this actually come from? Now, what's really interesting about this is the complete 180-degree contradiction between the two guys at the center of the story. On one side, his dad, Elon Musk, claims there was this super informal, undocumented emerald operation. We're talking no contracts, no paperwork, just handshake deals with an Italian trader. But on the flip side, Elon vehemently denies this mine ever existed. He calls the whole thing totally made up, and since the alleged operation was completely off the books, there's practically zero documentary evidence to prove it conclusively one way or the other. So instead of a trust fund or inherited wealth, Elon points to a totally different, frankly brutal early reality. When he emigrated to Canada at 17, he didn't have a safety net. He stayed in a youth hostel and worked grueling odd jobs. I mean, at one point, he was working in a lumber mill, literally shoveling hot sand residue out of a boiler room. It was a job so physically intense that 27 out of 30 workers quit in the very first week. And even later on, launching his first company, Zip2, he was living on $1 a day for food and sleeping on a literal beanbag chair in the office. It's a pretty massive contrast to the whole emerald mine legend, right? Moving on to Section 2, the relentless rise of SpaceX. From island strikes to historic launches. That extreme push-yourself-to-the-brink environment from his early days, that basically became the blueprint for his own companies. Take the early days of SpaceX. They were operating out on Omelek Island in the middle of the Pacific, trying to launch the Falcon 1. The pressure was just unbelievable. They were building a launch pad from scratch, battling failing valves and hardware bugs, and just one day before their very first launch attempt in 2005, the crew was so stressed and exhausted they actually went on strike. The crazy part? The tension was only resolved when a supply drop of chicken wings and cigarettes was flown in to calm everybody down. It's a starting anecdote that really shows the raw, human toll of those chaotic early days of development. And man, even with all that intense effort, failure was basically the daily norm. The maiden launch in 2006 ended in a massive fire at just 29 seconds. The second launch in 2007 failed. The third launch in 2008 failed again. The company was bleeding money at an incredible rate and was literally days away from complete financial collapse before they finally managed a successful orbit later in 2008. But let's step back and see how this builds, because surviving those near-death experiences led to some absolutely insane milestones. By 2012, SpaceX pulled off the first privately funded docking with the International Space Station. In 2015, they accomplished the impossible. They actually landed the first stage of an orbital rocket back on Earth. Mind-blowing. And by 2020, they became the first private company ever to launch humans into orbit. These are massive, history book-level achievements, all born out of a deeply chaotic beginning. Which brings us to Section 3, the price of extreme ambition. Let's deconstruct the 100-hour error. So how exactly do you drag a company from the edge of bankruptcy to rewriting aerospace history? Well, it all hinges on one specific number, the 100-hour workweek. This is the absolute anchor of his methodology. He's publicly advised other entrepreneurs that if everyone else is working 40-hour weeks and you put in 80 to 100, you're going to achieve in 4 months what takes them a whole year. It's perfectly logical math on paper, right? But practically, it hits some serious biological limitations.
Management research documents three very clear, very heavy costs to this extreme method. First up is the relational cost. His first wife, Justine, pointed out that even when he was physically at home, his mind was entirely somewhere else. Second, there's the health cost. Musk himself has admitted that to cope with the insane workload, he was pounding so much caffeine he literally started losing his peripheral vision. And third, the productivity cost. Working at that red line inevitably drains the people around you. So, the crucial point is, we aren't machines. The Harvard Business Review lays it out perfectly. Regardless of why we're doing it, overwork simply does not help us. Studies actually show managers often can't even tell the difference between employees who are grinding 80 hours a week and those who are just pretending to. For the vast majority of people, this kind of extreme framework is totally unsustainable, and honestly, it usually backfires.
And you can absolutely see the profound impact this has on the workforce. One former Tesla employee described the environment super bluntly, stating that the people who worked for him were treated like ammunition, utilized for a specific purpose until they were completely exhausted and then discarded. It perfectly illustrates the collateral damage required to operate on such aggressive, relentless timelines.
All right, let's pivot to our final chapter, Section 4, Neuralink and Our Ethical Future, the Frontier of Bioethics.
We've looked at his ambition applied to outer space and automotive tech, but now that exact same relentless drive is turning inward, right into the human mind. Back in 2016, Musk founded Neuralink. The whole focus of the company is BCI, or brain-computer interfaces. Put simply, this is tech that uses tiny micro-implants to create ultra-high-precision two-way communication directly between the human brain and external devices. We're talking about the absolute bleeding edge of neurotechnology here.
And this brilliantly illustrates a really intense tension right now. A recent paper in the Annals of Biomedical Engineering points out that while Neuralink promises a revolutionary new era of medicine, it also brings some totally unprecedented ethical, legal, and societal risks. The medical community is urgently calling for responsible innovation. Basically, they're begging for incredibly strict bioethical guardrails to manage this high-speed, high-stakes approach when it comes to the human brain.
Which leaves us with one massive, overarching question. We've looked at the unbelievable technological leaps today, rockets landing themselves, private crews going to the space station, and now actual interfaces linking our brains to computers. But we've also seen the methods required to get there, the grueling 100-hour work weeks, the massive human burnout, and those increasingly blurred ethical lines. So, do these historic milestones actually justify the extreme human and ethical costs required to achieve them? I'm going to leave that for you to decide. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.